Support for the BTPM NPR What's Next podcast comes from Health Foundation for Western and Central New York, partnering with the community to pursue racial and socioeconomic health equity. Learn more at hfwcny.org.
From Buffalo Toronto Public Media, this is What's Next, an hour dedicated to amplifying the voices of marginalized and underrepresented communities across Western New York and Southern Ontario.
We cannot erase, we cannot reform, we cannot make things better if we're uncomfortable having tough conversations,
Absolutely.
if we're uncomfortable talking about race.
What's Next carries forward our mission to engage in meaningful conversations about race, equity, and the shared concerns that deeply affect Buffalo's East Side and beyond.
Don't stop. Make those families part of your life. Their lives are part of yours. Don't stop.
Together, we dive into the real issues, striving for understanding, connection, and change.
In the suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of What's Next from Buffalo Toronto Public Media and NPR. I'm your host, Ijaz Jasil, and today we are talking higher ed. As state budget negotiations continue in Albany, advocates for SUNY say this is a crucial moment for students, campuses, and communities across New York. From access to programs like EOP to staffing and campus funding, the debate is really about whether public higher education is being treated as a priority. To talk more about that, I'm joined by Fred Kowal, president of United University Professions. Thank you so much, Fred, for joining me today.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
So I first just want to get a little bit of an overview of what we're facing right now as a state. Exactly what's going on in the SUNY system at the moment, and how is it impacting our colleges and universities across New York?
It's a great question to start with. It is a really unique set of circumstances right now. For the past 3 years, Governor Hochul and the New York State Legislature have put a great amount of resources into the SUNY budget over the last 3 years, probably about $500 million in operating aid that's the state operated campuses, roughly 30 campuses like Buffalo State, University of Buffalo, Fredonia. And at the same time, there are campuses that are struggling with serious financial difficulties, structural deficits that go back to the beginning of the Cuomo years. And so you have this weird push-pull where more resources are being put in, but because of decisions being made by SUNY leadership, the resources aren't going to help a campus like Buffalo State or Fredonia. And that's a real concern because every campus in SUNY has a unique mission, serves a unique population of students, and a unique community. And we think that given that the resources have been put into the budget by the governor and the legislature, those resources should be going to where they're needed so that it lifts up the financial situation for all campuses going forward. That's not what's happening. And my concern is that as a campus like Fredonia or Buffalo State struggle with deficits, with the financial storm that's coming from Washington, D.C., with the full implementation of the Big Beautiful Bill Act, I just call it the Big Ugly. Once it's implemented, it's going to create a real financial strain on these campuses. We need to take care of them now. So it's as I said, it's this weird circumstance where the resources are there, but they're not being provided where they should be. And instead, SUNY is calling for program cuts and, in essence, shrinking these campuses, which is the exact wrong thing to do.
So it seems like an amalgamation of issues that we're currently seeing with current federal and state administration and also past, revisiting something that you mentioned earlier and something we also discussed last month when you were here in Buffalo to address a $16 million structural deficit at Buffalo State University. During that time, you mentioned the trouble at Buff State and other institutions statewide, beginning with Andrew Cuomo's administration wanting to, as you put it, shrink the SUNY system. Can you tell me a little bit more about how the Cuomo administration contributed to the systemic issues that we are seeing today?
Yeah, and It really was a series of devastating financial hits. With the Great Recession and New York State's budget was, deeply in deficit. There were cuts, and SUNY was cut twice. There was a cut early in 2009 and again in 2010, as I recall. But then we more or less recovered from the Great Recession, not so well upstate, but there was a recovery of sorts. But the problem is when Cuomo came in, he froze funding at the state-operated campuses starting in 2011 and 2012. And without an increase, the cost of everything goes up. Financial challenges hit. You have a situation where at Buffalo State, if the state investment had been maintained throughout the Cuomo years, the campus itself would have $240 million more than they have right now, controlling for inflation. That's how devastating the Cuomo budgets were for those, 13 years or however long he was in office. And so that's what we're talking about trying to address. And it's an amazing thing that, Buffalo State University has continued to operate and serve the students they have really well, given these kind of shortfalls in resources.
It is astounding, and it's also astounding what you just mentioned. I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly why were these cuts made? Was there a definitive reason that former Governor Cuomo gave at the time? Why was higher education one of those areas that the state chose to, for lack of a better term, skimp on?
That's a huge question that a lot of us in SUNY have wrestled with for years. There's never been a policy explanation. Andrew Cuomo said what he wanted to say to whoever he wanted to speak to, and he never spoke about SUNY as a major important priority for himself, and it showed. And we've joked in those of us who do advocacy for SUNY, we've joked, what was the reason? What did SUNY ever do to Andrew Cuomo that made him so hostile to public higher education? And I think it was part of his economic approach. He was very neoliberal in his philosophy. He used to call himself, I think he called himself a progressive, a financially responsible progressive or something like that. And what he would say is, he was in favor of, the social changes like support for gay marriage and so forth. But in terms of funding public services, he was incredibly stingy. And he also had it in for public sector workers. I remember there was an op-ed he wrote in the New York Times right before his election the first time. And he talked about the fact that there needed to be a shrinkage of the public sector workforce, which right away set off alarm bells for me. I wasn't president of UUP at the time, but I didn't have to be to realize this could be a problem. But I think he saw the public sector as something that he could limit, he could restrict, he could shrink as a way of then offering tax breaks, et cetera, the old neoliberal model, and say, well, we've got private institutions that can pick up the slack. When in fact, what ended up happening is both private and public higher ed institutions suffered in the Cuomo years. So the only way I can explain it is it was his general attitude about public goods and the public sector, that he didn't really want to invest in it. And that was part of his conservative economic perspective.
Could anyone have predicted that the decisions made during that time would create the impact of what we're seeing today with shortfalls and structural deficits across our higher ed institutions?
Yeah, and I think, we were issuing alarm bells for years. But the problem is we as New York State sometimes have a very, very short attention span. And with legislators in the Cuomo years fighting over a lot of different budget priorities, aid to schools, local aid, Medicaid, those are huge budget items, higher education often doesn't get the attention. And when we were warning, I became president in 2013, we were warning about the effects of these cuts. The legislators, and they tried their best to put funding in, but we would warn them that campuses would be harmed significantly for the long run. And the response was, we know, but there's not much we can do about it. So I think there was a lot of whistling past the graveyard in those days in terms of what could happen. And, and I would just add this as well as part of the equation. As the Republican Party moved more and more to the right, it changed in New York State. For years, Republicans, especially in the state Senate, really were strong advocates for SUNY campuses, because many of them are in Republican districts, still are. And so prior to Cuomo, you would have the New York State Senate as the biggest advocates for SUNY and the Assembly more for CUNY. And together they'd work with governors of both parties to get good budgets. This changed with Cuomo. And then as the Republicans grew more conservative, they were abandoning the campuses in their districts and wouldn't fight as hard. We had a real tough time in the last few years when the Republicans had the majority in the Senate, getting anywhere with them. It just wasn't a priority anymore.
So it seems that higher education got caught in the crosshairs of political conflict almost.
Yeah, it did. And another way of looking at it is kind of the unwanted stepchild, and nobody would embrace it as a priority, which to her credit, especially when she came in, it was a breath of fresh air when Governor Cuomo gave her first State of the State and spent 25% of her first State of the State was about SUNY. It blew me away. It was like, wow, we haven't heard that in decades. So that was kind of nice.
Governor Hochul, yeah. So
yeah.
I understand you said
Cuomo. Yeah, my mistake. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I got Cuomo on the brain.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be a lot to be said about him in this subject matter.
Yeah.
So now, fast forwarding to where we are today, New York State has a $260 billion budget. I understand it would be such a minute fraction of that to devote to the SUNY institutions that are in deficits right now. And it seems that we could afford to invest more in higher education if we really wanted to as a state. So why do you believe state lawmakers haven't made it a greater priority even still?
Yeah, and I think what we've seen, as I said, we've had a couple of really good budgets, but this year, for the reasons I alluded to earlier, are really it's really crucial this year. What I'm afraid of is that of two things. One is the legislators are looking at the SUNY budget and saying, well, we already put in a whole bunch of money the last few years. This year, we've got to be careful because of what's coming in next year's fiscal storm, and it's going to be a really challenging year. So that's one aspect of it. But here's the other aspect, which is very frustrating for me and for us in UUP. And that is that the chancellor has not made funding to SUNY as a priority. He's talking more than anything else about capital funding for buildings and so forth. And yeah, an investment in capital would be nice. But he has when he testified, he basically said, testified at the legislature's budget hearings. He said, the campuses are basically doing okay. Even ones like Buffalo State, they're on the road to recovery. They're going to be fine.
What metrics was he using?
And that is absolutely not true, But if you're a legislator, if you hear that and he's running SUNY, you're tempted to say, well, then obviously it shouldn't be a priority for me. I've got other things I got to take care of. There are a lot of demands on the state budget. Our argument is, point one, he's wrong. You've got cuts going on at Buff State in terms of programs and loss of faculty. And then second, the reality is this is the moment to address the deficits before the state has a real financial crunch.
Right. And so from what it sounds like, even hearing the chancellor's point of view, there are some within SUNY who it seems might be a little out of touch as far as, what's happening to some of our campuses. And when you think about how this impacts every student, but there are some who bear more of an impact than others, some who are from typically underserved communities and demographics. And when you look at programs like the Educational Opportunity Program, for example, more commonly known as EOP, that's one that has faced significant cuts. For those who aren't familiar with that program, can you explain what it is and how these cuts are impacting the students who rely on it?
Yeah, this is a phenomenal program. It got its start with Assembly Member Arthur Eve back in 1967, and he was a freshman in the state legislature, and his proposal was his first year in the legislature, and he got it passed. And the idea of EOP right from the start was a dedication of state funding to bring in students who otherwise couldn't afford to attend and were not prepared enough given the way you had segregated schools in terms of resources and in reality. And so it was the idea of bringing in students who otherwise would not be attending. It's a classic opportunity program, remarkable idea. And as it's been carried out, has been so very successful. 90,000 EOP graduates, and they graduate at a higher rate than the general population of SUNY. But here's the crucial thing: from the start, from the summer before students start their classwork, they have programs during the summer that are required to be attended to prepare them for college and college life. They come in, they have support services and everything that is necessary for them to be successful with their academic program and also to adapt to college life. It is a case, which is one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about support for Buffalo State University. Buffalo State was really that was the starting point for EOP, and it remains in terms of the percentage of students from the general body, student body of Buffalo State. It's one of the highest percentage of EOP students, and they graduate. They stay in New York State. 85% of EOP students stay in New York State, work here, pay taxes. It's a phenomenal program that we have called for that program to be doubled in size. There are roughly 9,000 students in EOP, but 20,000 apply every year for a class of about 3,000. And so we can see there's a demand for it. It should be invested in. It should be an absolute priority because we hear the chancellor talk about low enrollment at institutions. Well, let's bring in the students who otherwise will not go, get them through, and create a body of citizens of the world across this state that reflect demographically the state of New York and where it's going. So I'm really passionate about EOP. We've called for $20 million increase in the budget for this year. And right now the budget's around $42 million. So we're asking for like a 50% increase. The Assembly in their one House budget put that in. We hope that's where we end up. This is a program that can grow, should grow, and would benefit the state and would benefit, real lives of people.
So then it makes me wonder, a program that obviously has such advantages, especially for students who may not have been afforded those advantages otherwise, why would a program like this, of all programs, face cuts? Isn't there, or should there be some sorts of protections for programs that are specifically designed to help students who are at, economic or educational disadvantages?
Oh, I feel very strongly that there should be. That going back to Cuomo, he every year would cut EOP. his predecessor, George Pataki, actually tried to eliminate the program in one of his first budgets, which is just insane.
Wow.
But nonetheless, what Cuomo would do is every year he would cut the budget. And when I used to deal with his staff, eventually the answer I got was, well, we know that the legislature will put the money back in. So this way it forces them to have to negotiate for it and we can get something else. So it's a cynical game that's being played with real lives.
So this program has been kind of used as a bartering tool almost?
Yeah, exactly. And which, disappointed me this year when Governor Hochul proposed a cut, basically taking away from EOP what was added by the state legislature last year. And it's like, come on, we're better than that, I would hope, as a society. And so it pleased me that both houses put money back in and added to it. I think the Senate put in another 6.4 million, and like I said, the Assembly put in 20 million. That's where we need to be going, and it should be sacrosanct. It should be like entitlement programs federally. You just don't touch EOP because it's so vitally important.
So before we get into our break here, based on just everything you've said about EOP alone, it appears that not all cuts are equal. There are some who suffer more than others as far as students in higher education. When we are also looking at other cuts, like cuts to programs that universities and colleges are making due to the structural deficits, what kinds of programs are we losing and how's that affecting the higher ed careers of students?
It is a case where one of the greatest strengths of SUNY was that, and I hate using the past tense, was that you could take programs at any of the campuses and really have a unique set of choices. You want to go to a small upstate school, you get those opportunities. You go to a university center, a great school like UB, you can have the programs you're looking for. As this chancellor puts in place these stabilization, quote unquote, programs, and programs get cut because they don't have many students in them, they may not have those students now, but you are still restricting and limiting the choices that students have. The fact of the matter is there are students, I met one that was going to Potsdam way up north, and he's a physics major, and they were getting rid of physics. And he said, but I wanted to come here because it's a small department. I know the faculty members. I don't want to go to Stony Brook. I don't want to go to Binghamton. Not throwing shade at those campuses, but the fact of the matter is that's where this kid wanted to go. And why not have that opportunity? When you restrict choice and opportunity, you drive students to think about going somewhere else. And that's bad for the system, and it's just bad for our society. Public higher education is an incredibly important institution, and we should continue to invest in it and give students opportunities.
Yeah, and you said something profound the last time you were here about Buff State specifically and campuses like it being urban engaged campuses, ones that really bring the people experience to the students, so to speak. With these last couple of minutes before we go to break, can you just talk about, do these colleges and universities typically face more hardship? And if so, for what reasons?
Well, and I think in Buffalo State's perspective, you're right. I mean, where it's located, it is absolutely central and crucial to the neighborhood in Buffalo. It is the only urban campus in the whole SUNY system, which is incredible. I mean, there are some that are in cities, but they're really specialized, not like Buff State. I think they do face challenges because the fact that you're going to be bringing in students who may or may not be, or even if they're from an urban area, say they're coming from New York City, Buffalo is very different than New York City. If they're coming from rural areas, it's going to be very different for them. And so the necessity for resources to be put into work that some of our members do in terms of student support, the costs of and the services for those who live on campus, those are all got to be very important because these students are adjusting to a new environment and yet it gives them an experience they won't otherwise have, which is obviously really, really important in any kind of educational setting.
Absolutely. The Urban Engaged Campus experience is a different one. Having been a Buff State alum myself, I can attest to the fact that you get something a bit different at a university. Well, at the time I went college like that you don't get at a lot of other places. So when we come back, we will continue this conversation, and I'd love to hear more about your perspective from someone who is fighting for both the students and staff at these institutions facing these types of deficits. For all of our listeners, stay with us. We'll be back with more What's Next here on Buffalo Toronto Public Media and NPR.
What is BTPM Plus? It's an evolution of Buffalo Toronto Public Media that brings you the best of PBS, where you can watch your favorite programs live and dig into collections curated just for you. And here's the best part. When you stream BTPM Plus, you're not just watching, you're supporting your local public media station, the journalism, the arts, and the storytelling that keeps our community connected. Visit btpm.org/plus today. Stream smarter, stream local.
A downed tree, a broken bike or two, and hundreds of miles between Buffalo and Brooklyn. That's the journey in Rolling Through, a new video series from Buffalo Toronto Public Media. Producer Pat Kelly is biking the Empire State Trail, exploring nature, culture, and how eco-friendly travel can connect us to the places we visit.
Oh, we are getting rain soon.
Cool.
We can wrap
it's coming. New episodes of Rolling Through arrive every week. Watch on the BTPM YouTube channel and BTPM Plus.
BTPM NPR's Disabilities Beat promotes awareness and inclusivity, amplifies underrepresented voices, and holds corporations and governments accountable.
So I'm wondering, what assurance can you offer consumers that these problems won't repeat in New York?
Hear reports from the Disabilities Beat, hosted by Emily Watkins every Wednesday on BTPM NPR during Morning Edition and All Things Considered. BTPM Disabilities Beat is funded in part by the Peter and Elizabeth Tower Foundation.
You're listening to What's Next, our place to discuss the important issues of our communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario. We want to hear from you. Click on the Talk to Us option in the BTPM Listen app, and we will work to get your questions or comments on the air. Do you have a story or concern that we should be addressing? Email us using what'snext@btpm.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us on this episode of What's Next. We're talking the impact of budget cuts, program cuts, and structural deficits to our higher ed institution, especially for students who are at educational and economic disadvantages. And I'm joined again by UUP President Fred Kowal, which is the union representing SUNY faculty and professional staff. Can you tell me, Fred, a little bit more about United University Professions and how your journey led you here to overseeing this organization and the work that you do?
UUP is the largest higher education union in the country. It is remarkably unique in that we represent at the roughly 30 campuses in SUNY that are funded by the state. The easiest way is we don't represent folks at community colleges. But the campuses where our members work, they do everything from obviously teaching classes, but then also they are in financial aid offices, they are in admissions staff, they are EOP counselors, and in some cases, directors of those programs. At the SUNY hospitals, it's in Syracuse, downstate in Brooklyn, and out at Stony Brook, and upstate is in Syracuse. We represent the physicians, the tech folks, the nurses, the nurse supervisors. So it is an incredibly diverse membership in this union. That's roughly 42,000 members that we represent. And the work that we have, we've been doing for 50 years now. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary back in 23, which was, pretty awesome. But what brought me to it was I was actually living in Montana years ago. I don't want to admit how long ago, but a job opening came to my attention to teach at the State University campus at Cobleskill, a tech campus. And so I jumped at the chance because I had taught in grad school, and so I wanted to get back into it. And the idea of doing public service is something that I've always cared about deeply. And I was involved with UUP for a while, stepped away, but in 2013 ran for the presidency to a large extent because I saw UUP as potentially a major change agent in New York State, that we could bring about the resources to the campuses, the really promoting the work we do in such a fashion so that not just honoring the work that we do, but also attracting more and more people to want to teach research work at SUNY campuses, and then bring in more students as well. And fortunately, despite some big challenges over the years, we are a more influential, powerful union than we were when I started, not because of me, but because of a great team of folks and a lot of work done by lots of folks. And so it is challenging, but it is now more than ever, given the Trump regime, the work that we do in UUP in defending the work that we do, defending each other and defending our principles couldn't be more important. And so I'm energized by the challenges, but at the same time, sometimes just shocked and dismayed by what comes out of DC and the folks who are in the White House and around it.
I can definitely imagine at a time like this, it certainly comes with its highs and lows, what you're doing now. And we have talked a lot about how what we're seeing impacts the students, but equally what impacts the students is impacting the faculty and staff here. So you're seeing it from both sides. And I do want to talk a little bit more about the workforce behind student success. How are these policies that we're seeing on state and federal levels affecting the counselors, the professors, the program coordinators? And what does this mean for student life?
That is a really important question. I would say that my biggest frustration in this work is what I hear from the members of UUP at places like Buff State and Fredonia, but even at UB, which has a lot of resources. People have been doing more with less for 15 years, sometimes longer. And what it does is, obviously, it burns people out. It makes it more and more difficult to do the good work that's necessary. It amazes me when I hear from students who say they treasure their experiences at SUNY, and they just honor the work that a counselor has done, a professor has done, and there's real, not just pride, but this sense of gratitude. And I know that if the resources were there, these incredible professionals and academics could do even more, and for more students. We heard it at the rally at Buffalo State. What the students said was just so powerful and moving of what they see that institution, what it means to them, and what UUP members are doing. So that both, when I hear students saying that keeps me going and energized, but at the same time, it also angers me and frustrates me because, what I hear from SUNY leadership is, well, in essence, you got to do more with less at a place like Buff State, and that's just wrong. We should be investing. This is a wealthy state, higher concentration of billionaires than any other state in the union. We've got the money. It's choice. It's the wrong choice that's being made right now. So we hear about burnout. We hear about faculty members and professional staff now also being hit with the anti-DEA stuff coming out of Washington, with the cutoff of grants, all of that, literally driving people out of SUNY as in other higher ed institutions. And it's intentional. The Trump regime wants to bring harm to higher education so that they can control it, or I think more accurately, crush it. And because the last thing you want when you're an authoritarian is an enlightened, educated, politically engaged population.
That's a powerful statement. Another thing that I was wondering about as far as decisions that the Trump administration has made, there was, I believe, a list of majors, college majors that were declared, I guess, economically unadvantageous, or there are some decisions to cut or get rid of some majors that are proven not to, I guess, make people a lot of money or that are not deemed important, like some involving the arts or anything promoting, diversity, equity, or inclusion, those words we can't really say anymore. How do these cuts, are they specifically targeting these sorts of programs as well? I imagine they are. I guess what I really want to know more than anything is how is this affecting the diversity of our colleges and universities? I know that's something that a lot of higher education institutes strive for, student and faculty diversity, but who are we leaving out and cutting out with these changes that we're seeing?
Yeah, and I think I haven't seen data yet that would show what the impact has been in the year and a quarter since Trump came in. But in the real world, as I would put it, what we are seeing is not just what the Trump administration is doing in, directing federal funding to certain types of programs, as you were saying, and excluding other programs. What we're seeing at the state level, not just in states like Texas, where Texas A&M, which is probably the worst of the lot, where they have eliminated women's studies, they have eliminated African American studies. They've just, put an axe to these programs and just gotten rid of them completely. It's also impacted in New York State because, at Buffalo State, at Fredonia, wherever in the SUNY system where there are deficits, campuses are being directed to eliminate programs. And they usually say, well, they're under-enrolled. And we've talked about this earlier, but when I look at a program like at Buffalo State, where the major in sociology was eliminated, sociology is not just an important major and a field of academic study in and of itself. It is also important for other areas of the student experience. If you're a business major, taking a sociology course might give you your first exposure to the economic, social, psychological impacts of racism on African Americans, on people of color in general. And you take away a major, it means faculty in that department may not stick around. And so students aren't going to have the same experience, and they're not going to be, they are not, I used the term earlier, they're not going to be citizens of the world. They're not going to have the full experience. Let me, and it's not a digression, but this is something that I've thought about a lot. I heard a few years ago, I heard Doris Kearns Goodwin interviewed, and she said that it was a problem when we got rid of the draft because, like during World War II, and my father had this experience, during World War II, people from all over the country were thrown together in the military. Even, military was segregated still. But it brought people together in ways, and then obviously when military was integrated, that was a huge step forward. And so people got to experience each other and understand the diversity of the country. I think now that we don't have that, I think public higher education can serve that role. Bring people in from all sorts of diverse areas. We get to learn from each other, understand each other, and the society is better for it. If you institute efforts which are happening in terms of programs, in terms of funding for scholarships and support, Pell Grants and so forth at the federal level, you're going to limit opportunity, but not just to those who can't afford to go, but also for those who do go and don't get to experience the kind of diversity that I think everyone should experience, and culturally and sociologically and so forth. I kind of went off there, but I feel very strongly about what higher education can do. I mean, I wouldn't have been I've been in higher ed for, well, at least 40 years. I started young. But it means so much to me because it can make such a huge difference.
Yeah, and when you look at a place like New York State, which is the melting pot of the melting pot, which is America, our higher ed institutes definitely reflect that. Even a city like Buffalo, students come from different states and even countries just to attend our higher ed institutions. And that's another aspect of it about public education as an economic engine. You know, so many students come here, and that in turn brings more benefits to the city as a whole. Can we talk about how our colleges and universities are really essential in driving economic impact in our regions, and how the city, as a whole can suffer if those institutions face these cuts?
Yeah, huge impact. Research has shown year after year that for every dollar that the state invests in SUNY, multiplies by a factor of 8, 7 to 8, depending on the year, but it's a huge amount. And what that means is the students who are coming to Buff State, they're not living in a bubble. They're coming into the community. They go out to local businesses. They spend money. The faculty and professional staff who live in the city or in the area, they are spending money, they are paying taxes, and it's a big impact, as I said earlier, in the area around Buffalo State. But if you look at a campus like Fredonia, without that campus, that area of that county, I think it's Chautauqua County, there's nothing left. And where I live in Schoharie County, without Cobleskill College, there's nothing. In many upstate cities, towns, villages, whatever, long ago, there were mills, there were factories. They're gone. What the factory is the SUNY campus. And you keep cutting these budgets, you're doing two harms. One is obviously to students and to our members who are doing the work, but also to the communities for the long run. The out-migration from New York State overwhelmingly depends on investment in public. It's such an important avenue for economic growth. And Upstate's economy has stagnated for years. A parade of governors keep pouring money into economic development, and they turn out to be a waste of money and a lot of corruption, and there's no bang for the buck. Whereas in higher ed, the return is both immediate and in the long run, because as I said about EOP students, 85% stay in New York State. Yeah. And that means they're taxpayers and they are economic engines of their own.
That's impressive. So it's undeniable the impact that our institutions have on our regions. And so we've seen how important our institutions are, and we see the problems and how they got us where we are today. When we come back, we'll look at some possible solutions as we continue to take a deeper dive into higher education. Stay with us for more What's Next here on BTPM NPR.
Looking for stories and conversations that matter? Buffalo Toronto Public Media delivers trusted journalism, inspiring arts, educational resources, and programs for the whole family at btpm.org. This is public media.
Corey here with the Compact Civics Expansion Pack.
America is such a big, wide, awesome place, and to be able to see things that are representative of so many different places can be so important when brought to your tiny town.
Everybody is so kind and loving. I'm here in Buffalo just because of State Buffalo.
From urban farms to rural fairs, we'll celebrate spaces that bring us together and create community.
Watch on the Buffalo Toronto Public Media YouTube channel.
Our mission at Buffalo Toronto Public Media is to serve our local community. by keeping you informed and connected to your community. Whether it's by learning the power of Thanksgiving from the Haudenosaunee,
and it really helps us to reset and re-ground ourselves in that perspective of gratitude and abundance, which is the core of our, what we call Ganaquio or Ganagohio, the good mind.
or keeping up on local sports teams on Skin in the Game with John Simperman and Tim O'Shott.
How would you describe the growth of basketball in Canada and the popularity of basketball in Canada over the last 30 years now for the Raptors, right?
Yeah. When I was a head coach at Niagara, this would have been 93 or 94, and they announced that Toronto was going to get an NBA franchise. I remember we had a staff meeting, and I said to my assistant coaches, this is the new frontier.
This is public media.
You're listening to What's Next, our place to discuss the important issues of our communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario. We want to hear from you. Click on the Talk to Us option in the BTPM Listen app, and we will work to get your questions or comments on the air. Do you have a story or concern that we should be addressing? Email us using what'snext@btpm.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR.
Thank you for joining us once more for What's Next. I'm joined by Fred Kowal, president of the United University Professions. We've talked about the cuts and the deficits that we've seen in our higher ed institutions across New York State. And I understand that people like you, Fred, are doing the work to bring about solutions and to raise this topic in Albany for the lawmakers who can actually have the power to change what we're seeing going on right now. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing and what you're advocating for right now?
Sure. The UUP has a tradition, two traditions. One is, for far too long, really going back to the start of the 21st century. In a weird sort of way, SUNY stopped being an aggressive advocate for itself as an agency. And that got worse during the Cuomo years because, Cuomo had his thumb on everything and really restricted what agencies could do on their own. And what happened is that UUP really became the advocate for SUNY, for funding, for support for students, everything. And that takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of time. We do it. It's unusual for unions to advocate for their employer, but we do it because we believe in the work that we do, and the institutions need somebody to advocate for them. And students certainly do. And so what has happened over time is that, we usually develop in a very democratic fashion a legislative agenda every year, and it tends to be very comprehensive. I mean, we don't just deal with funding for SUNY, we also deal with issues like, what the institutions in SUNY can do to combat the climate crisis, what should happen with regard to progressive taxes, a whole host of things. One of the things that I'm most proud of, since your audience in part is Western New York and specifically Buffalo, and we've talked a lot about Buffalo. One of the things that I felt very strongly about in the aftermath of the terrorist attack on May 14th, just a few years ago, was that I met with my staff and we talked about what we could do to be part of the response to the horrific crimes committed in that community. And we waited a few months because, there was a lot of jumping in quickly to do things that unfortunately were more symbolic than real. And so what we did was we hosted a national panel discussion on the disparate conditions of mental health targeting specifically the African-American community. We did the event at Buff State, and it was meant to highlight the emotional toll that the events of May 14th had on that population in that community in East Buffalo. But the long history of, not just disparate treatment, but also the human cost of the racism and therefore also the lack of mental health services. So it was wrapping all those things together. What that translated to eventually was doing extensive amount of advocacy for a program based on EOP, which is mental health EOP. We've been advocating for it for years now. And that is to put funding into a pipeline program to bring in diverse folks who want to be in mental health work and get the SUNY degree and then be in the community. That's the kind of advocacy we will do beyond finances. But when it comes to finances, it is sometimes embarrassing. You said it earlier on, right? The budget in New York State is what, $260 billion or something? Mm-hmm. Right now, our focal point is $41 million for the 4 most deficit-ridden campuses in SUNY, and that's Buffalo State, Fredonia, Potsdam, and ESF, and College of Environmental Sciences and Forestry. $41 million. By my calculation, the war against the people in Iran is costing us, this is a calculation from a couple of weeks ago, ironically, $41 million an hour, okay? So Wow. We're talking about an hour of war to end the deficits. Tells you something about where we are as a society. But at the same time, that's how small the amount of money is. And you mentioned at Buffalo State, $16 million. That's pocket change in the size of the budget that we have. Quite. And so we advocate for that. We work as hard as we can. We have a very engaged membership and student body, as you saw at Buffalo State. And we hold out hope that we're going to be able to get through. The legislature says the right things, but we got to get through to the governor to take the course of action that we believe is best for her hometown and for these incredible institutions.
So how do we do that? This fight is so much bigger than just, which with all gratitude to UUP and what you all are doing, but it's a cause that essentially the everyday person needs to take up. It's reaching out to our elected representatives. I know when you were here in Buffalo, you mentioned that Western New Yorkers advocating to state legislators for fixing Buff State's deficit included, someone like Senate Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, even though she recently announced that she wouldn't be running for re-election. But who should we be calling? Who should we be writing letters to? And not just in Buffalo, but the larger picture of New York State. What does advocacy on an everyday person level look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think this is something that unfortunately, to a certain extent, has been lost, where people feel so removed from politics and are so turned off by it, and so it's like, well, what difference can one person make? One person can make a huge difference. Our state legislators, they're right now, I think they're in town to pass an extender, but then they'll be back in town. And until the end of session, they're available in their offices on every Friday. And it is imperative that the people of Buffalo who benefit from Buffalo State and certainly UB as well, that they reach out to their assembly member, pick up the phone, give them a call. Crystal Peoples-Stokes has incredible power in the New York State legislature. And, she's a graduate of Buffalo State. This is her home campus. But there are other state legislators who can make a real difference in budget negotiations. The way it works is they can tell the leadership of the speaker and the majority leader not to agree to a budget unless the funding is there. That's all it's going to take. And in Buffalo State, and we've said this a couple times in this conversation, Buffalo State has such an important role in that community, members of the community, the business community, and we try probably not hard enough to bring them into the advocacy work, to contact their local legislators and say, hey, my restaurant is not going to survive without good funding for SUNY. So, I pay taxes, I'm invested in the community, do the right thing. And reach out to the governor. It's an election year. She needs to hear from the folks who live, again, as I said, in her hometown. I'll probably get in trouble for this. Buffalo is more than just the Bills. And so, let's focus on what's important for the long run.
That is a great sentiment to end it on. And certainly, as our politicians are looking to us for votes right now, people power matters. Thank you so much, Fred, for joining me, and much success to you and the folks at UUP for advocating in Albany. And thank you for the work that you're doing for our institutions.
Thank you, Jazz. It was a real pleasure.
Likewise. And that does it for this episode of What's Next. We will see you next time on Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR. I'm your host, Ijaz Jasil. Thank you for listening.
Support for the BTPM NPR What's Next podcast comes from Health Foundation for Western and Central New York, partnering with the community to pursue racial and socioeconomic health equity. Learn more at hfwcny.org.